Marcus Chen stood before the towering Victorian mansion, wondering if he'd finally lost his mind. The realtor, Miss Patel, kept glancing between her tablet and the property as if expecting one of them to suddenly make sense. "Mr. Chen, I must stress again, while the price is remarkably low, there are peculiarities about this property that previous buyers found concerning." Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled black hair, his other hand clutching the coffee that had become his primary food group since the startup's collapse. At 32, he'd watched his life's work crumble when their quantum computing project lost funding. Now, this mansion's price tag matched his severance package exactly, too perfectly to be coincidence. "The peculiarities being," he prompted, taking another sip of his rapidly cooling coffee. Ms. Patel's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Well, for one, the basement laboratory. The previous owner, Dr. Elizabeth Wright, was a renowned physicist who disappeared 3 years ago. Her research team claimed she was working on something revolutionary, but she hesitated. The equipment down there, it's unusual." Marcus perked up. "Laboratory. Yes, but it's been sealed since her disappearance. The police investigation found nothing suspicious, just a lot of very expensive equipment that nobody seems able to identify." She shuffled through her papers. "There's also the matter of the power consumption. The house draws massive amounts of energy, even when completely empty. We've had electricians look at it, but they can't locate the source of the drain." A faint smile tugged at Marcus's lips. High power consumption, mysterious laboratory equipment, a disappeared physicist. It was like the universe was dangling his dream research setup in front of him. "I'll take it," he said, cutting off whatever warning Miss Patel was about to deliver. 2 hours later, Marcus stood alone in his new home, surrounded by boxes of his meager possessions. The mansion's interior was a strange mix of Victorian grandeur and modern technological retrofitting. Fiber optic cables ran alongside ornate crown molding, and sleek metal panels were mounted on mahogany walls. The basement door called to him like a siren song. It took 3 tries to get the old key to turn in the lock, but finally, the heavy door swung open with a dramatic creak. Motion sensors detected his presence, and lights flickered to life, illuminating a sight that made his coffee cup slip from suddenly numb fingers. The basement wasn't just a laboratory. It was the most advanced quantum research facility he'd ever seen. Holographic displays lined the walls, showing complex equations that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. In the center of the room stood what could only be a quantum computer, but unlike any he'd ever encountered. Its architecture was organic, almost alive, with crystalline structures that pulsed with an inner light. "Holy shit," he whispered, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. As if in response, the quantum computer's crystals flared brighter. A holographic interface materialized in front of him, displaying a message that made his heart skip. "Stasis Pro Tokyo LDTCTE. Qmpate IBL Operator PREZ Ent. Initiate Restoration CQENC." Marcus's finger hovered over the yes prompt. Every sci-fi movie he'd ever watched screamed that this was how horror stories began. But the scientist in him, the dreamer who'd spent his life pursuing the boundaries of quantum computing, couldn't resist. He pressed yes. The quantum computer's crystals began to pulse rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Energy cascaded through the crystalline structure, forming patterns that reminded Marcus of neural networks. A soft humming filled the air, rising in pitch until it was just at the edge of his hearing. Then reality itself seemed to hiccup. The air in front of the quantum computer rippled like heat waves over hot asphalt. A figure began to coalesce, first as a wireframe, then filling in with color and substance. Marcus stumbled backward as a woman materialized before him, wearing what looked like a highly advanced research suit. She opened her eyes, a startling shade of silver that seemed to hold galaxies within them. Her dark skin had an otherworldly sheen, and her hair defied gravity, floating as if she were underwater. "Oh, thank God," she said, her voice carrying an accent Marcus couldn't place. I was beginning to think nobody would ever crack the quantum signature. She stretched, her movements fluid and slightly too precise to be natural. 3 years in digital stasis really cramps the avatars. Marcus's scientific mind warred with his instinct to run. "Dr. Wright," he ventured. She laughed, the sound like crystal wind chimes. "Elizabeth." "No," though she was brilliant. "I'm Dr. Zora Patel. No relation to your realtor." She tilted her head, studying him with those unnerving silver eyes. "And you're Marcus Chen, the quantum computing specialist who just lost his startup." Perfect timing, really. "We have about 72 hours before they realize I've rematerialized, and we're going to need every minute of it." Marcus found his voice. "They?" Zara's expression turned grave. "The ones who tried to shut down our research into parallel Earth quantum computing. The ones who forced me to digitize myself to preserve our work." She gestured at the quantum computer. "The ones who are probably already on their way here to make sure I stay deleted." Marcus looked at his empty coffee cup, wishing it were something stronger. "I think," he said carefully, "you'd better start from the beginning." Zara's lips curved into a smile that was both brilliant and slightly terrifying. "Oh, Marcus, the beginning hasn't happened yet. But it will, and soon, assuming we survive the next 3 days." Through the basement's tiny windows, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quantum computer's crystals. Marcus had a feeling his life had just become exponentially more complicated. And somewhere, in a parallel Earth, something noticed that Dr. Zora Patel was no longer safely contained in digital stasis. The countdown had begun. Morning found Marcus slumped over his kitchen counter, nursing his 5th cup of coffee, while Dr. Zora Patel manipulated holographic displays that shouldn't have been possible in his kitchen. Her silver eyes reflected streams of quantum data as her fingers danced through the air, leaving trails of light in their wake. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said, rubbing his temples. "You're from a parallel Earth where quantum computing advanced far enough to discover interdimensional travel." "Correct." Zara's fingers paused mid-gesture, freezing a complex equation in the air. "Though parallel isn't quite accurate. Think of it more like a quantum superposition of multiple possible Earths, each vibrating at a slightly different frequency. And your Earth is more technologically advanced than ours. In some ways." She dismissed one display with a flick of her wrist. "We focused heavily on quantum computing and consciousness digitization, but we never developed social media or smartphones. Different technological paths, different societal pressures." Marcus watched as she called up another display, this one showing what looked like a map of overlapping realities. "And these people after you, they're from your Earth." Zara's expression darkened. "The Quantum Preservation Society. They believe interdimensional travel will destabilize all realities. When they discovered our research team had successfully created a stable bridge between dimensions, She trailed off, her form flickering slightly like a bad video signal. Marcus straightened, alarmed. "Are you okay?" "Just a quantum fluctuation." She steadied herself against the counter, her hand passing partially through it before solidifying again. "That's the other problem. My digitized consciousness is only partially reintegrated with this reality. I need to stay within range of the quantum computer to maintain coherence. So you're trapped here, in this house, for now." She pulled up another display, this one showing complex biological readings. "The quantum computer is acting as an anchor point, maintaining my wave function collapse in this reality. If I move too far from it..." She made a popping gesture with her hands. "You destabilize," Marcus finished, his mind racing through the quantum mechanical implications. "But wait, how did Dr. Wright get involved in all this?" "Elizabeth." Zora's smile turned fond. "She detected our quantum signals 3 years ago. Brilliant woman. She figured out we were trying to establish contact and helped us build this facility. She was supposed to be my anchor here, but when the society attacked, her form flickered again, more violently this time." Marcus instinctively reached for her, his hand passing through her shoulder like smoke. The sensation sent shivers down his spine, like touching an electrical field. "Sorry," Zara said, solidifying again. "The reintegration process is still ongoing. It should stabilize in about 12 hours, assuming." A deep thrumming cut through the air, making the windows vibrate. Zara's displays flickered and died. "They're here," she whispered, her silver eyes wide. "Already? That's impossible. We should have had more time." Marcus rushed to the window. A black van had pulled up outside, unmarked except for a small quantum mechanics symbol on its side. Men in dark suits were emerging, carrying equipment he'd never seen before. "Those aren't from the Society," Zara said, her voice tight. "Your government must have detected the quantum surge when I reintegrated. Fantastic. Now we have two groups trying to capture me. What do we do?" Zara's form stabilized, taking on a more solid appearance. "We need to get to the basement. I can mask our quantum signature, but I'll need your help. How much do you know about quantum entanglement?" "Theoretically, quite a bit. Practically." He gestured at her ethereal form. "Not so much." "Well," she said, a hint of her earlier smile returning, "you're about to get a crash course." "Literally." She grabbed his hand, her touch now feeling like static electricity rather than smoke, and pulled him toward the basement door. Behind them, someone knocked on the front door. "Mr. Chen," a official-sounding voice called. "This is Agent Reynolds with the Quantum Security Division. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the energy signature we detected." "Back door," Marcus whispered, but Zara shook her head. "They'll have the house surrounded. The basement is our only option. Your Earth may not have quantum shielding yet, but mine does." She pressed her palm against the basement door, sending ripples of energy through the wood. "I just hope I have enough coherence to activate it." The knocking grew more insistent. "Mr. Chen, we have a warrant. Please open the door." Marcus looked at Zara, at the door, and at the quantum equations still floating in his kitchen. His life 24 hours ago had been about failed startups and coffee. Now he was harboring an interdimensional refugee, while government agents knocked on his door. And somehow, he'd never felt more alive. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Zara's smile lit up like a supernova. "Remember all those quantum computing theories you worked on? Time to put them into practice." She pulled him through the basement door just as the front door began to splinter under the agent's assault. The quantum computer hummed to life as they descended the stairs, its crystals pulsing with an urgent rhythm. Zara's form grew more solid the closer they got to it, but the silver in her eyes began to swirl like mercury. "Marcus," she said, her voice taking on a multitonal quality that made his ears ring, "I hope you're ready to rewrite everything you thought you knew about quantum mechanics." Above them, the front door crashed open. Footsteps thundered through the house. "Ready or not," Marcus muttered, placing his hands on the quantum computer's interface where Zara indicated, "Here we go." The world around them began to blur as quantum possibilities overlapped. And somewhere, in another reality, the Quantum Preservation Society detected a surge of energy they'd hoped never to see again. A game was on, and the rules were about to change, across all possible Earths. The quantum computer's crystals pulsed with emergency protocols as Marcus and Zara worked in synchronized desperation. Above them, heavy footsteps methodically searched the house. The air crackled with dimensional energy, making Marcus's skin tingle and his vision blur at the edges. "The quantum shielding is holding," Zara announced, her hands moving through complex patterns in the holographic interface. Her form had stabilized further, though occasional ripples of quantum distortion still passed through her like waves. "But we've got bigger problems." Marcus looked up from the crystalline matrix he was reconfiguring. "Bigger than government agents." "Much." She pulled up a new display, showing what looked like a radar screen crossed with a kaleidoscope. "The Society is coming. They've detected my quantum signature across dimensional boundaries." Red points of light appeared on the display, moving with frightening purpose toward their location. Each point represented a tear in reality, a potential incursion point. How long? Marcus asked, trying to focus on the quantum equations streaming past his fingers rather than the footsteps now descending the basement stairs. Minutes, maybe less. Zara's silver eyes flickered with calculations. The good news is, your government's agents might actually help us. Their presence creates a quantum observation effect that could make it harder for the society to pierce the dimensional veil. A pounding on the basement door made them both jump. Mr. Chen, this is your final warning. And the bad news. Marcus prompted, his fingers flying over the quantum interface. The society doesn't care about collateral damage. They'll collapse this entire reality bubble if they have to. She paused, placing her hand over his on the interface. The contact sent shivers of quantum energy up his arm. Marcus, I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into an interdimensional war. He met her mercurial gaze. I was ready for a career change anyway. The basement door burst open just as the first dimensional tear appeared. A crackling wound in reality that split the air like lightning. Government agents poured down the stairs, weapons raised, only to freeze at the impossible sight before them. Through the tear stepped a figure that made Zora's form look perfectly normal by comparison. It was humanoid, but its body seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, shifting between possibilities like a living quantum uncertainty. Dr. Patel, the figure said, its voice resonating on multiple frequencies. Protocol demands your termination to preserve dimensional stability. Protocol demands wisdom before action, Zora countered, stepping forward. Her body language was different now, more formal, more alien. The barriers are already weakening. Suppression is no longer viable. The government agents had backed against the walls, their weapons wavering between Zora and a quantum being. Agent Reynolds, a sharp-featured woman in the lead, found her voice first. What is this? This, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off the quantum interface, is first contact. Just not the kind you were expecting. More tiers were opening now, more quantum beings stepping through. The basement had become a crossroads of realities, different versions of Earth bleeding into each other at the edges. The calculations are clear, the first being stated. Your experiments risk cascading collapse across all probability streams. Your calculations are incomplete, Zara shot back. She gestured, and new equations bloomed in the air around them. Marcus, show them. His fingers danced across the interface, bringing up the work they'd done in the past desperate minutes. Look at the harmonic resonance patterns. The dimensional barriers aren't weakening because of interference. They're evolving, adapting. The quantum beings study the equations, their forms flickering with increased agitation. Impossible. The modals are wrong, Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. Your models assume dimensional stability requires separation. But look at the quantum entanglement signatures. The barriers are becoming permeable because they're supposed to. Zara's smile was fierce with pride. Evolution isn't limited to biological systems. Reality itself evolves. The walls between dimensions aren't breaking down. They're transforming. And we can either help guide that transformation or be crushed by it. The quantum beings conferred in a language that made Marcus's ears hurt, and the government agent's equipment shored out in showers of sparks. Agent Reynolds had lowered her weapon, her face a mask of awe and fear. Finally, the first being spoke again. Your evidence is compelling, but protocol requires verification. Then verify, Zora challenged. But do it quickly, because if we don't stabilize these quantum harmonics soon, this whole conversation becomes academic. As if to emphasize her point, reality rippled around them. The quantum computer's crystals pulsed with warning patterns, and for a moment, Marcus could see through the basement walls to other versions of his house, other possibilities branching out like a tree of infinite maybes. The harmonics are degrading, he reported, his fingers flying over the interface. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. The quantum beings moved with sudden purpose, their forms aligning into perfect geometric patterns around the quantum computer. "We will assist in stabilization," they announced in unison. "But the protocol remains in effect. If your theory proves incorrect, Dr. Patel, then none of us will exist to argue about it." Zara finished. She turned to Marcus, her silver eyes swirling with emotion, ready to help rewrite the laws of reality. He looked at the government agents pressed against the wall, at the quantum beings arranged like a living constellation, at the tears in space-time showing glimpses of infinite other Earths. Then he looked at Zora, this impossible woman from another dimension who had turned his life upside down in the best possible way. "Reality," he said, placing his hands on the quantum interface, "could use a good rewrite." The quantum computer began to hum, its crystals blazing with power as they began the most ambitious experiment in human history, across all possible histories. The fate of multiple universes hung in the balance, and it all depended on proving that walls between worlds were meant to come down. Above them, the sun reached its zenith, unaware that in a basement in an unremarkable house, reality itself was about to change forever. Time behaved strangely in the basement as they worked to stabilize the dimensional boundaries. Minutes stretched like hours, then compressed into seconds. Marcus's fingers had stopped shaking hours ago, muscle memory taking over as he manipulated quantum algorithms he'd only theorized about before today. Zara moved around the quantum computer like a dancer, her form shifting between solid and ethereal as she coordinated with the quantum beings. The government agents had been evacuated to a safe distance, though Agent Reynolds insisted on maintaining a perimeter around the house. Through the tears in reality, Marcus caught glimpses of other basements, other Zoras, other versions of himself, all working in synchronization across dimensions. A harmonic convergence is approaching critical threshold, one of the quantum beings announced, its form geometrically precise with tension. "We see it," Zara responded, her voice carrying echoes of her other selves. She turned to Marcus. "The quantum foam is becoming more malleable. We need to establish the new dimensional protocols before it resolidifies." Marcus nodded, though his head was spinning with the implications, like programming reality while it's rebooting. "Exactly." Her smile carried across all her quantum echoes, ready to debug the universe. He laughed despite the pressure. "No choice now. We're committed to this branch of reality." As they worked, Marcus couldn't help but notice how natural it felt working with Zora. Their movements complemented each other perfectly, as if they'd been partners for years instead of days. Even their quantum signatures had begun to synchronize, creating interference patterns that the beings studied with great interest. "Fascinating," one of them commented. "The human quantum state is harmonizing with Dr. Patel's digital matrix." "Is that bad?" Marcus asked, not taking his eyes off his calculations. "Unknown," the being replied. "Such synchronization between organic and digital consciousness across dimensional boundaries is unprecedented." Zara's hands paused momentarily over her interface. "Marcus, your quantum signature. It's becoming entangled with mine." He looked up, meeting her silver eyes. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, reality shuddered. The tears in space-time began to pulse in rhythm with the quantum computer's crystals. Through them, Marcus could see other versions of Earth, some radically different from his own. In one, crystalline spires rose into purple skies. In another, organic technology had merged with nature, creating living cities. "The multiverse is trying to find its new equilibrium," Zara explained, her voice tight with concentration. "The barriers between dimensions are becoming semi-permeable, just as we predicted. But, the quantum entanglement between us is affecting the process. Our synchronized consciousness is creating a template for how the dimensions should interact." She bit her lip, an oddly human gesture for someone who currently existed partially as digital information. "Marcus, I have to tell you something." Another reality quake hit, stronger than before. The quantum beings moved in complex patterns, trying to stabilize the dimensional boundaries. Critical decision point approaching, they announced in unison. Dr. Patel must choose her dimensional alignment before the new protocols are established. Marcus's hands froze over the interface. What does that mean? Zara's form flickered rapidly between states as she struggled to maintain coherence. It means I have to choose which reality to anchor myself to. Once the new dimensional protocols are set, my consciousness will have to fully materialize in one world or risk being torn apart by quantum uncertainty. You mean you have to go back? The thought sent an unexpected pain through his chest. That was the original plan, she admitted. Return to my Earth once we proved dimensional travel was safe. But now, she gestured at the quantum readings surrounding them. Our consciousness synchronization has complicated things. If I leave, the quantum harmony we've established could collapse. Everything we've worked for would unravel. And if you stay, I'd be trapped here permanently. The quantum computer could sustain my digital consciousness, but I'd never be able to return home. Her silver eyes met his. I'd be committing to this reality. This Earth, this life. Another surge rocked the basement. Through the dimensional tiers, Marcus could see the other versions of themselves having similar conversations, each pair facing the same decision across infinite realities. Time is critical, the quantum beings warned. The choice must be made before dimensional reconciliation. Marcus wanted to tell her to stay, but the words caught in his throat. How could he ask her to abandon her entire world, her life, her people, just because working with her felt like the most natural thing he'd ever done? Because the thought of her leaving made him feel like he was losing a part of himself. I can't make this decision for you, he finally said. I know. She smiled, though her eyes shimmered with quantum uncertainty. But maybe you already have. Maybe we both have, across every reality where we've met. The quantum computer's crystals pulsed with increasing urgency. The tiers in reality were beginning to stabilize. The new protocols starting to take shape. Soon, the choice would be made one way or another. Zara stepped closer to Marcus, her form solidifying until she was more present than he'd ever seen her. The air between them crackled with quantum potential, infinite possibilities collapsing into a single moment of choice. The thing about quantum mechanics, she said softly, is that sometimes the act of observation affects the outcome. Sometimes just by watching, by caring about the result, we change what's possible. She reached out, her hand hovering just above his chest. Your heart is quantum entangled with mine now, Marcus Chen. Across all possible realities, we've created something unprecedented. The question is, what do we do with it? The basement hummed with power as reality held its breath, waiting for an answer that would echo across dimensions. And in that moment, suspended between infinite possibilities, Marcus realized that some choices transcend even quantum mechanics. The multiverse watched and waited as love and science prepared to rewrite the rules of existence itself. The basement had become a nexus of realities, each tear in space-time, showing a different version of their story playing out across dimensions. The quantum beings maintained their geometric formation around them, their forms flickering with increasing urgency as the universal constants themselves hung in the balance. Final convergence approaching, they announced, their voices resonating across dimensional boundaries. Choice must be made. Reality must stabilize. Marcus and Zara stood at the quantum computer's interface, their hands moving in perfect synchronization as they guided the reformation of dimensional barriers. Through the tiers, they could see their counterparts doing the same, an infinite dance of science and emotion playing out across the multiverse. The quantum harmonics are almost aligned, Zara reported, her silver eyes tracking data streams only she could fully perceive. Once they lock into place, the new dimensional protocols will be permanent. A surge of energy pulsed through the basement, making the quantum computer's crystals flash brilliantly. One of the tiers widened, showing Zora's home reality, a world of crystalline cities and digital consciousness, where the boundary between organic and artificial had long since dissolved. Your window of return is opening. The quantum being stated. The choice must be made now. Zara's form flickered, pulled toward her native dimension. Marcus. He caught her hand, feeling the electric tingle of her quantum state against his skin. Wait. Look at these readings. On the interface, new patterns were emerging in the quantum foam. The entanglement between their consciousness had created something unprecedented. A bridge between organic and digital existence, between worlds, between possibilities. The dimensional barriers, Marcus said, understanding dawning. They're not just becoming permeable. They're becoming connective. Like neurons in a brain. Zora finished, her eyes wide. The multiverse isn't just allowing travel between realities. It's building a network. They said in unison, their quantum-synchronized minds reaching the same conclusion. The quantum beings shifted, their geometric pattern changing as they processed this revelation. Impossible. The calculations are showing exactly what we theorize, Zara interrupted. Reality isn't meant to be segregated. The dimensions are meant to communicate, to share information, to grow together. Marcus's fingers flew over the interface, bringing up new projections. Look at the quantum signature patterns. They're not random. They're forming synaptic-like connections between dimensions. The multiverse isn't breaking down. It's waking up. Zara breathed. Through the tears, they could see their other selves making the same discovery across infinite realities. The quantum computer's crystals pulsed in harmony with the dimensional frequencies, no longer fighting the changes but helping to guide them. The protocol. The quantum beings began, but Zara cut them off. The protocol was wrong. We were all wrong. We thought dimensional separation was necessary for stability, but it's the opposite. The barriers between worlds aren't walls, they're synapses. And now they're firing. Reality shuddered again, but this time it felt different. Not like breakdown, but like awakening. The tiers in space-time began to oscillate with purpose, exchanging information across dimensional boundaries. Choice remains, the quantum beings insisted. Dr. Patel must align with one reality. No, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. That's not the choice at all. Zara doesn't have to choose between realities any more than a neuron has to choose between being part of the brain or not. She can be part of the network. We all can. Zara's form stabilized as she grasped the implications. The quantum entanglement between us. It's not just about us. It's a template for how consciousness can exist across dimensional boundaries. Organic, digital, quantum. They're all just different aspects of the same thing. The quantum computer's crystals blazed with new purpose as they input the final algorithms. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as the program executed. The quantum beings moved closer, their forms shifting as they integrated the new understanding into their protocols. The dimensional network is stabilizing, they announced. New paradigm. Acceptable. Protocol updated. Zara turned to Marcus, her silver eyes shining with joy and possibility. We don't have to choose between worlds. We can be part of all of them, help guide the connection, help the multiverse understand itself. Marcus smiled, squeezing her now solid hand. I guess this means I don't have to lose you after all. Lose me? She laughed, the sound echoing beautifully across dimensions. Marcus Chen, you're stuck with me across every reality that ever was or will be. We've got a multiversal network to help build. Above them, the sun was setting on one world and rising on countless others. The quantum computer hummed contentedly, its crystals pulsing in rhythm with the dimensional synapses they'd helped create. Agent Reynolds and her team would have questions, of course, but those could wait. Right now, Marcus stood with Zara in their basement at the heart of infinite realities, their consciousness resonating across dimensions, their quantum-entangled hearts beating in sync with the pulse of an awakening multiverse. Through the stabilized tiers in reality, they could see endless possibilities stretching out before them. New worlds to explore, new understandings to discover, new ways of being that transcended the boundaries between digital and organic, between one world and another. ready to help guide the evolution of reality itself? Zara asked, her form shimmering with possibilities. Marcus looked at the quantum computer, at the dimensional tiers showing infinite worlds, at the woman who had turned his understanding of reality upside down in the best possible way. With you? Across every dimension. The quantum beings dispersed, their forms dissolving into the new dimensional network they would help cultivate. The government agents would return soon, full of questions about humanity's new place in an infinitely larger existence. But for now, in a basement that had become the nucleus of a multiversal awakening, Marcus and Zara stood together, their consciousness spanning realities, their love defying dimensional boundaries. The story of humanity was about to change forever, expanding across infinite possibilities. And it all started because a disillusioned software engineer bought a house with a quantum computer in the basement, proving once again that the greatest discoveries often come from the most unexpected places. Through the dimensional tiers, infinite versions of Marcus and Zara smiled at each other, ready to begin their work as guardians of a newly awakened multiverse. After all, reality itself had chosen them to be its first true interdimensional citizens. And that was just the beginning.